The autumn rain drummed against Central Perk Cafe's floor-to-ceiling windows, each droplet catching the amber glow of Manhattan's evening lights. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her Hermes blazer for the third time in 5 minutes, her manicured fingers drumming against the marble tabletop with practiced precision. 7 o'clock sharp, just like every other meeting in her meticulously orchestrated life as CEO of Future Learning Inc. At 29, Sarah had built her world on exactitude. Board meetings at 9, investor calls at 2, strategy sessions until midnight. Her penthouse apartment overlooked Central Park's sprawling greenery, her walk-in closet rivaled Bergdorf Goodman's executive floor, and her bank account held more zeros than most people encountered in a lifetime. Yet here she sat, palms unexpectedly damp like a nervous teenager, waiting for a blind date arranged by her college roommate Jessica. "You desperately need this, Sarah," Jessica had insisted over their monthly lunch at Le Bernardin, Manhattan's temple of culinary perfection. "When's the last time you went on a date that wasn't with your MacBook Pro?" Sarah checked her Cartier watch again. 7:03 p.m. In her precisely controlled universe, 3 minutes late signaled disrespect, inefficiency, lack of commitment. She was mentally composing her polite exit text when three small voices pierced through the cafe's ambient chatter like silver bells cutting through corporate noise. "Excuse me, are you Sarah?" Sarah looked up from her iPhone, expecting to see their server. Instead, she found herself staring at three identical little girls, no older than 5, standing beside her table like they'd stepped straight out of a Ralph Lauren kids catalog. Matching red wool sweaters that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries, blonde curls tied with crimson silk ribbons, and eyes the exact color of spring sky after rain. Wide, hopeful, and absolutely fearless in the way only children could manage. "We're here for our daddy," announced the middle girl with the matter-of-fact confidence of a seasoned diplomat addressing the United Nations. "He's really sorry he's late. There was a medical emergency, and he had to drive someone to Mount Sinai Hospital immediately." Sarah blinked once, twice, 3 times, her Harvard MBA brain struggling to process this deviation from expected parameters. This wasn't how blind dates were supposed to unfold according to every romantic comedy she'd ever watched during rare moments of downtime. The cafe was supposed to be quiet, romantically lit, a chance to evaluate whether Jessica was right about this mysterious single father who allegedly possessed the kindest heart in Manhattan and deserved someone truly special. But Jessica had conveniently forgotten to mention children in her matchmaking pitch. She'd definitely never mentioned triplets. The first girl stepped forward with the boardroom confidence Sarah recognized from her own executive presence training. "I'm Emma," she said, extending a tiny hand like a junior partner at Goldman Sachs. "This is Lily, and that's Grace. We're 5 years old, and we're exceptionally good at keeping secrets." She paused, her expression shifting to something almost sheepish. "Except this particular one. Daddy's going to discover our plan very soon." Sarah set her phone down slowly, her confusion transforming into something warmer, curiosity mixed with genuine amusement. These children possessed a disarming quality she hadn't expected, an honesty and earnestness that her corporate world rarely provided. "How exactly did you know I'd be here tonight?" "We overheard Daddy talking to Aunt Jessica on his phone," Emma explained with the surgical precision of a McKinsey consultant delivering quarterly projections. "He specifically mentioned meeting someone named Sarah at Central Perk Cafe at 7 o'clock this evening." He sounded nervous. Really nervous. Which is unusual because Daddy never gets nervous about anything important. "He kept changing his shirt," Lily added, her artistic soul evident in the way she painted the scene with careful words. 3 complete outfit changes, which has never happened in our entire observational history. Grace nodded with the ancient wisdom that somehow only 5-year-olds possessed. "And Daddy never changes his shirt once it's selected. That's how we knew this meeting was extraordinarily important to his emotional well-being." Sarah found herself leaning forward, drawn into their earnest conspiracy, like a general being briefed on a critical military operation. "So you 3 decided to arrive here before him?" "We didn't want you to think he had forgotten about you," Grace explained, her gap-toothed grin radiating pure, innocent intention. "Because he absolutely didn't forget. He was so excited this morning that he burned the pancakes worse than usual, which we previously thought impossible. Daddy always burns pancakes, Lily clarified matter-of-factly, as if this were a fundamental law of physics. But today's breakfast was truly catastrophic. Smoke alarm activation and everything. Despite her carefully controlled life derailing spectacularly in real time, Sarah found herself laughing, a genuine, surprised laugh that came from somewhere deep and almost forgotten. Not the practiced chuckle she deployed in board meetings when investors made mildly amusing observations about market conditions. "How did you convince your babysitter to bring you here?" Sarah asked, though her strategic mind was already beginning to piece together the sophisticated nature of their operation. The triplets exchanged synchronized glances that spoke of shared secrets and years of coordinated thinking. "We may have informed Mrs. Patterson that Daddy had specifically approved this outing," Emma admitted with the careful diplomatic language of someone who understood the difference between truth and creative interpretation. "Which he will approve," Grace added quickly, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "Once he sees that our mission was successful." "What mission?" Sarah asked, though her executive instincts were already assembling the pieces of their elaborate strategy. Lily leaned forward, her expression becoming serious beyond her chronological years. "Operation Daddy's Happiness Restoration." "Why is this so important to you?" Sarah asked gently, her voice softening in a way it rarely did outside of her private moments. "Why go through all this trouble?" The cafe seemed to quiet around them, as if even the espresso machine and the perpetual Manhattan energy outside were waiting for their answer. It was Grace who spoke first, her small voice carrying a weight that made Sarah's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Because Daddy's been sad for a really, really long time," Grace said simply. "He doesn't think we notice, but we do. We notice everything. He smiles when he's with us," Lily added, her artistic sensibility evident in how she carefully chose each word. "But when he thinks we're not looking, his face goes empty, like someone erased all the happiness." Emma, the natural leader, took control of the explanation with the efficiency of a seasoned executive. "He takes perfect care of us, makes breakfast every morning, even when he burns it completely, helps us with homework even when we don't want to do it, reads us bedtime stories about brave princesses who save themselves. He's literally the best daddy in the entire world. But he never ever does anything for himself," Grace said quietly, her voice carrying the kind of observation that only children who love someone completely could make. "Grandma Thompson says he's scared." "Scared of what?" Sarah whispered, though she was beginning to understand the shape of their father's particular wounds. "Of getting hurt again," Emma whispered back, her 5-year-old wisdom cutting straight to the heart of adult complexity. "Like when Mommy went to heaven." The missing piece clicked into place with devastating clarity. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared pain that transcended the boundaries between stranger and family. "Your mother," she said carefully, not wanting to overstep but needing to understand the full scope of their story. "She was a doctor, like Daddy used to be," Grace said with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children somehow manage better than adults when facing life's cruelest realities. "She helped children with cancer, which made her really important and really good. But then she got the same sickness she was trying to cure in other people. And even though Daddy tried everything, every treatment, every medicine, every prayer, sometimes love isn't strong enough to make the sickness go away." "Daddy says she loved us very, very much," Lily added, her voice holding no bitterness, no resentment. "Only the pure acceptance of a truth too large for anyone to change. But sometimes love isn't enough to make people stay when God calls them to heaven." Sarah's throat tightened with the recognition of loss, of the careful way children learned to carry grief that was too big for their small shoulders. She knew that particular flavor of abandonment, that careful reconstruction of hope around the hole someone's absence had torn. Before Sarah could respond, before she could even process the full magnitude of what these 3 remarkable children were offering her, the cafe door chimed with the sound of evening traffic and adult urgency. A man stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath, his brown hair damp from October rain, and his casual button-down wrinkled from what had clearly been a frantic drive across Manhattan's congested streets. His eyes swept the cafe with barely controlled panic until they landed on their corner table, on three blonde heads bent over steaming hot chocolate, and on the woman sitting across from them with an expression caught somewhere between shock and enchantment. "Oh no," Emma whispered, her confidence suddenly replaced by the realization that their elaborate plan was about to face its first real test. Target acquired, mission status, potentially compromised. "He's here," Grace breathed, somewhere between excitement and terror at the consequences of their unauthorized operation. Lily grinned with artistic appreciation for the drama of the moment. And curtain up. Ryan Thompson had experienced many different types of panic in his 32 years of life. The panic of holding three newborn babies simultaneously while his wife recovered from an emergency cesarean section that had saved all four of their lives. The panic of watching Victoria's cancer return despite every treatment protocol, every experimental therapy, every desperate bargain with a universe that seemed determined to take the best parts of his world. The panic of realizing he was suddenly and completely responsible for three brilliant, complicated, beautiful little girls who deserved so much more than a broken-hearted father could possibly give them. But this, standing in the doorway of Central Perk Cafe, staring at his daughters chatting animatedly with the woman he was supposed to meet under completely different, carefully planned circumstances, this was an entirely new category of terror that his medical training had never prepared him for. He'd been in the middle of his evening shift with Med Transport, carefully navigating Manhattan traffic while transporting a cardiac patient to Mount Sinai's emergency department, when Mrs. Patterson's increasingly frantic texts had lit up his phone like an emergency room alert system. "Mr. Thompson, the girls are insisting I take them somewhere urgent. They said you specifically approved it. Mr. Thompson, we're currently at Central Perk Cafe on the Upper West Side. I think you should come immediately." His heart had performed a complicated gymnastics routine as the pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Central Perk, 7 o'clock. The blind date Jessica had arranged after months of gentle persistence. The date he'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating for weeks like a patient awaiting test results that could change everything. Now here he was, watching his three mischievous, brilliant, impossible daughters executing what appeared to be the most elaborate matchmaking scheme in Manhattan's romantic history. And Sarah, because it had to be Sarah, even though he'd only seen Jessica's carefully chosen photograph, was smiling. Not the strained, polite smile of someone trapped in an awkward situation beyond their control, but something genuine and warm that made his chest do unexpected things. "Hi, Daddy," Grace called out cheerfully, waving as if meeting for coffee with strange women was perfectly normal Tuesday evening behavior. The entire cafe turned to watch him cross the space that felt like walking through quicksand in a recurring nightmare. When he reached their table, he found himself caught between apologizing profusely and simply disappearing into the floor through sheer mortification. "I am incredibly sorry," he began, running a hand through his damp hair in a gesture that made him look younger and more vulnerable than his 32 years. "I had absolutely no idea they were planning this elaborate operation. There was a medical emergency, a patient needed urgent cardiac transport to Mount Sinai, and everything happened so fast I didn't even check my phone until—" Sarah held up a perfectly manicured hand, her eyes holding something that looked suspiciously like amusement rather than annoyance. "You must be the man who stood me up for three significantly more charming dates." Ryan winced visibly, his expression cycling through embarrassment, admiration, and something that might have been relief. "Not intentionally, I swear on everything sacred. I was absolutely going to call you, but the patient was in critical condition, and then Mrs. Patterson's messages and—" "Daddy," Emma interrupted, with the gentle diplomacy of someone who had clearly inherited negotiation skills from somewhere in her genetic code. "She's not angry with you. We handled the preliminary relationship negotiations successfully. And she genuinely likes us," Grace added proudly, as if this had been the primary objective of their entire mission. Ryan looked at Sarah, his expression hovering somewhere between hopeful and mortified. "I really am sorry. This is absolutely not how I wanted our first meeting to unfold." "How did you want it to go?" Sarah asked, and there was something in her voice, a hint of shared understanding, that spoke of someone who'd also learned that life rarely followed even the most carefully constructed scripts. Ryan laughed, a sound caught between exhaustion and wonder. I honestly don't know. Less chaotic? More traditionally normal? Normal is significantly overrated, Sarah said, and the way she looked at his daughters suggested she meant every word. Besides, your girls are absolutely excellent company. They've been telling me fascinating stories about you for the past 20 minutes. Oh God, Ryan muttered, earning delighted giggles from his peanut gallery. Don't worry, Sarah laughed, a real laugh that transformed her entire face. Mostly good things, except for the pancakes. They were very detailed about the pancake situation. Over the following weeks, what had begun as the most accidental encounter in Manhattan history evolved into something neither Sarah nor Ryan had expected or planned for. Sarah found herself genuinely looking forward to Ryan's evening texts, sent after the girls were asleep, sharing stories about their day or asking thoughtful questions about her latest investor presentations. She attended Grace's dance recital at the Queens Community Center, cheering louder than anyone else in the audience and feeling her heart swell with unexpected pride. She helped Lily with a science project about renewable energy sources, discovering that the 5-year-old had ideas that could genuinely revolutionize her company's sustainability initiatives. Emma, with her natural leadership capabilities, appointed herself the unofficial coordinator of what she had privately termed Operation Happy Family. She kept detailed notes about Sarah's favorite coffee order, oat milk latte with an extra shot of espresso, her work schedule, always busy but never too busy for them, and her growing collection of their artwork now displayed prominently in her penthouse office overlooking Central Park. But it was the quiet moments that began to matter most in ways Sarah couldn't have predicted. Ryan bringing homemade soup to her office during her latest product launch crisis, staying to help her think through problems while she ate something nutritious for the first time in days. Sarah teaching the girls how to code basic animations for their tablets, watching their faces light up with the joy of creation. The four of them building elaborate blanket forts in Sarah's living room, while Manhattan glittered 40 floors below, like a constellation of possibilities. 3 months into their unconventional courtship, during their fourth official dinner at Sarah's penthouse, the first significant crack appeared in Ryan's carefully maintained facade. Sarah was showing the girls her spectacular view of Central Park when she noticed Ryan studying the framed medical journal covers on her bookshelf with unusual intensity. Publications focused on healthcare technology innovations and surgical advances that she collected for her company's research into medical education platforms. Interesting reading material, he murmured, his finger tracing the spine of a particularly technical volume about cardiac surgery applications in pediatric medicine. Research for work, Sarah explained, settling beside him on her Italian leather sofa. We're developing educational platforms for medical training programs. I try to understand the terminology and concepts, though most of it goes completely over my head. Ryan's expression grew distant in a way she'd never seen before. This article about minimally invasive valve replacement procedures, it's absolutely groundbreaking work. Dr. Patricia Chen at Mount Sinai is genuinely revolutionizing the entire field of cardiac surgery with these techniques. Sarah stared at him, her CEO instincts picking up on something significant. You know Dr. Chen's research? Personally? Ryan realized what he'd revealed and quickly attempted to backtrack. I read medical journals sometimes. When you're doing patient transport, you pick up terminology and concepts, but Emma, with her characteristic precision and complete inability to recognize when adults were trying to hide something, chose that exact moment to shatter his careful deflection. Daddy, why don't you tell Sarah about when you used to work at the big hospital? Before Mommy got really sick and you had to take care of us full time? The room fell completely silent except for the distant hum of Manhattan traffic 40 floors below and the girls' quiet chatter as they explored Sarah's contemporary art collection. Emma, sweetheart, Ryan said quietly, his voice carrying a gentle warning. Why don't you girls go look at Sarah's paintings in the living room for a few minutes? After the girls had wandered off, their voices fading into excited commentary about Sarah's collection of abstract expressionist works, Ryan sank into one of her chairs and buried his face in his hands like a man carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear alone. "I was a doctor," he said finally, his voice muffled but clear. "Cardiothoracic surgery, chief resident track at Mount Sinai, with a guaranteed fellowship position waiting." He looked up at Sarah, his eyes holding 3 years of carefully suppressed grief and professional identity crisis. "I gave it all up when Victoria died. I couldn't save the person who mattered most in the entire world. What was the point of having all that training, all that knowledge, all those life-saving skills if it failed completely when I needed it most?" Sarah moved to sit across from him, her corporate instincts temporarily shelved in favor of simple human connection. "So you became a medical transport driver." "Seemed appropriately fitting," Ryan said, his laugh hollow with self-recrimination. "I could still help save lives, just from a safe distance. No pressure, no responsibility for the actual outcomes. No more watching people I love slip away despite everything I know how to do." His voice cracked slightly. "Turns out you can't actually hide from who you are forever, no matter how hard you try." 3 months later, Sarah's carefully ordered world faced its first major seismic disruption when two threats materialized simultaneously with the precision of a coordinated military attack. Ms. Amara Mitchell? Her assistant knocked on her office door during blocked focus time, highly unusual since Sarah's calendar was specifically marked for strategic planning. "There's a Robert Sterling from Tech Giant Corporation demanding an emergency meeting. He says it's urgent regarding your IPO filing. And there's also a Dr. Victoria Thompson here who says she needs to speak with you immediately about Ryan." Sarah's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Robert Sterling, Marcus's older brother and Tech Giant's notoriously ruthless CEO, and Victoria Thompson, Ryan's supposedly deceased wife. Two names that should never have appeared in her office on the same day, threatening everything she'd built professionally and personally. The conference room filled with an almost palpable tension as Robert Sterling spread legal documents across her mahogany table, while Victoria Thompson stood near the windows like an elegant predator surveying her territory. Robert, impeccably dressed in a Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most people's annual salary, smiled with the cold calculation of a corporate shark who'd smelled blood in the water. "Sarah," Robert began, his voice carrying the kind of smooth menace that made boardrooms fall silent, "we've discovered some extremely interesting irregularities in your IPO documentation. It appears your educational algorithms bear suspicious resemblance to our proprietary learning systems. We'll be filing federal intellectual property theft charges unless you withdraw from the IPO process immediately." Before Sarah could formulate a response, Victoria stepped forward with the graceful authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention in operating rooms and medical conferences. Tall, elegant, with the kind of natural beauty that didn't require enhancement and the confident posture of someone who'd spent years making life and death decisions, she looked like she'd stepped directly from the pages of Medical Journal Quarterly. "I'm Dr. Victoria Thompson, Ryan's wife," Victoria said, the word wife landing like a physical blow to Sarah's solar plexus. "I understand you've been babysitting my family while I completed my pediatric oncology fellowship at Zurich Children's Hospital. That arrangement ends today." Sarah felt the room spinning slightly, her Harvard-trained mind struggling to process the simultaneity of professional destruction and personal devastation arriving at the exact same moment. "This coordination isn't coincidental," she realized aloud, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. Robert's predatory smile confirmed her suspicion immediately. "Victoria reached out to me when she learned about Ryan's new domestic situation with a prominent tech CEO. Mutual benefits. I eliminate unwanted market competition. She reclaims her family from an obviously temporary arrangement." Victoria's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "I've been monitoring their situation from Switzerland through various channels. Ryan's been living like a hermit, driving for rideshare applications when he could be practicing medicine at the highest levels. Those girls need stability, proper education, comprehensive health care, advantages my new position at Memorial Sloan Kettering can provide. And conveniently," Robert added with corporate precision, "eliminating Future Learning Inc. from the market removes any financial incentive for Ryan to maintain his current arrangement." Sarah's iPhone erupted with urgent vibrations mid-confrontation. Ryan's name flashing on the screen with the insistence of an emergency alert. The sound cut through the corporate tension like a scalpel through skin. Sarah! Ryan's voice cracked through the speaker, raw with parental terror that transcended all other considerations. Grace is in the emergency room at Mount Sinai. Internal injuries from a playground fall at school. They want to operate immediately, but something feels fundamentally wrong about their assessment. I can't. His voice completely shattered, revealing 3 years of suppressed medical trauma. I can't lose her too. Please, if you can come. Sarah stood abruptly, her executive presence filling the room with sudden authority. We're finished here. Sarah, Robert called after her, his voice carrying corporate menace. You have exactly 24 hours to withdraw your IPO filing or face federal prosecution for intellectual property theft. And Ryan will learn the complete truth about our marriage tonight, Victoria added with cold certainty, along with the reality of his current situation. At Mount Sinai's Pediatric Emergency Department, Sarah found Ryan pacing the waiting area with the frantic energy of a caged animal, still wearing his med transport uniform, his hands visibly shaking as he clutched a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Through the window of examination room 3, she could see Grace lying on a gurney that made her look impossibly small under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Emma and Lily sat in plastic chairs designed for adults, their usual animated chatter replaced by worried silence that seemed to fill the entire space. Victoria commanded immediate attention from the medical staff with her credentials and natural authority, her presence transforming the emergency room dynamic in ways that spoke of years spent in similar high-pressure situations. As her biological mother and a board-certified attending physician, Victoria was saying to a young resident who looked barely out of medical school, I'm authorizing immediate appendectomy. Dr. Chen, please proceed with surgical preparation without further delay. No. Ryan's voice cut through the sterile air like surgical steel, carrying an authority that made everyone in the vicinity stop what they were doing. He pushed past the nursing station and entered the examination room, his entire demeanor transforming from worried father into something Sarah had never witnessed. A brilliant physician reclaiming his expertise in a moment of absolute crisis. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Chen said with barely concealed impatience, we've discussed this extensively. Your daughter presents with classic appendicitis symptoms. Delayed treatment risks rupture and life-threatening sepsis. She doesn't have appendicitis, Ryan stated with absolute conviction, his voice carrying the kind of medical authority that commanded respect in operating rooms worldwide. Examine her again. Actually examine her instead of rushing to predetermined conclusions. He moved to Grace's bedside, his examination technique gentle but masterfully thorough in ways that spoke of years of specialized training. Grace, sweetheart, I need you to show me exactly where it hurts most. It's not the stabbing pain the doctor described, Grace replied with remarkable clarity considering her condition. It's more like a deep stomach ache that won't go away. And my mouth tastes really strange. Ryan's face went pale with recognition, his medical training overriding 3 years of self-imposed exile from his profession. Dr. Chen, examine her tongue immediately. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate parental anxiety, but look at her tongue right now, Ryan commanded with the voice of someone who'd spent years making split-second decisions that determined whether children lived or died. The young doctor peered into Grace's mouth, and Sarah watched his confident expression crumble in real time. Grace's tongue was bright red with a distinctive strawberry texture that clearly hadn't been present during his initial examination. This isn't appendicitis, Ryan declared, his voice carrying undeniable medical authority that filled the room. This is Kawasaki disease in early presentation. She needs immediate IVG therapy, not surgery. I'm Dr. Ryan Thompson, former chief of cardiothoracic surgery at this institution, and if you operate on this child based on your current misdiagnosis, you'll be committing actionable malpractice. The examination room erupted into controlled medical precision as Dr. Chen immediately called for senior consultations. Nurses pivoted to completely different treatment protocols, and Victoria stood frozen in shock at this revelation of her ex-husband's hidden identity and professional expertise. Sarah watched Ryan transform from humble transport driver to the brilliant physician he'd once been, finally understanding the terrible weight of responsibility and skill he'd been carrying in exile. This level of life and death decision-making, this burden of other people's survival, he'd carried this for years before Victoria's illness had broken something fundamental inside him. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah asked quietly as they waited for Grace's treatment to stabilize her condition. Ryan's hands were shaking now that the immediate medical crisis was resolving, adrenaline and suppressed grief making him look vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with professional competence. "Because I'm not that person anymore. That person couldn't save Victoria when she needed saving most. That person failed completely when everything depended on getting it right. That person just saved your daughter's life," Sarah said firmly. "Our daughter," corrected a small, drowsy voice from the hospital bed. Grace, alert despite everything she'd been through, was watching them with understanding that seemed far beyond her chronological age. "Sarah came when we needed her. That's what real moms do." Victoria had remained silent throughout the entire medical crisis, but now she stepped forward, her professional composure finally cracking under the weight of what she'd witnessed. "Ryan, I had no idea you'd completely abandoned medicine. When I heard you were driving for rideshare applications, I assumed you were just taking time to process everything." "You assumed I'd failed professionally," Ryan finished quietly, his voice carrying 3 years of carefully controlled pain. "Maybe I did fail. Maybe leaving medicine was the biggest mistake of my life, but it was my choice to make, and I made it for them." He gestured toward his daughters with protective fierces that spoke of love deeper than professional identity. Victoria looked at Sarah, then at Ryan, then at 3 little girls who were watching this adult conversation with the gravity of Supreme Court justices evaluating constitutional law. "I've made terrible mistakes, haven't I? Leaving them when they needed me, staying away while they grew up, letting you tell them I was dead instead of fighting to remain part of their lives." "Yes," Ryan said with the simple honesty that had always defined his character. "You did make those choices." "Can I?" Victoria's voice broke slightly, revealing vulnerability that her professional persona usually concealed completely. "Can I try to fix some of this? Not as your wife. I understand the door closed permanently years ago. But as their biological mother? If I actually earn that title instead of simply claiming it by default?" Ryan looked at Sarah with a question in his eyes that spoke of partnership and shared decision-making. Sarah took a deep breath, thinking about 3 little girls who deserved every possible source of love and stability in their complicated world. "They should have the opportunity to know their biological mother," Sarah said carefully, choosing her words with the precision of someone who understood the complexity of blended family dynamics. "But they already have their real mother, me. If you want to be part of their lives, Victoria, it's as Aunt Victoria, someone who visits, who cares deeply, but who doesn't attempt to rewrite the family history we've built together." Victoria nodded slowly, tears flowing for the first time since she'd entered their lives. "I can accept that arrangement. Thank you for being more generous than I deserve." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the same Central Perk cafe where their story had begun, but this time she wasn't waiting for a blind date arranged by well-meaning friends. Emma had texted her that afternoon. Yes, the 6-year-old now possessed her own iPhone, much to Ryan's amused terror about modern parenting, asking her to meet them for what she'd termed their regular Tuesday family strategy session. What Sarah discovered when she pushed through the familiar door made her heart stop entirely and then restart with a rhythm she'd never experienced before. Ryan stood near their original table, wearing the kind of nervous energy she remembered from that first chaotic evening when 3 little girls had ambushed her romantic expectations. Emma, Lily, and Grace had positioned themselves strategically around the cafe like generals commanding a battlefield, each holding poster board signs that, when read in sequence, delivered a message that made Sarah's eyes immediately fill with tears. "Will," Emma, grinning like she'd just executed the perfect business acquisition strategy. "You," Lily, bouncing on her toes with artistic excitement that could barely be contained. "Mary," Grace, beaming with the satisfaction of a successful family reunion coordinator. "US," Ryan, dropping to one knee as Sarah's hands flew to her mouth in complete shock. The entire cafe fell into the kind of reverent silence usually reserved for Broadway theaters during climactic moments. Other patrons pulled out their phones, recognizing they were witnessing something worth preserving forever. The barista paused mid-espresso preparation. Even Manhattan's perpetual motion seemed to pause in recognition of the moment's significance. Sarah Mitchell, Ryan began, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet space with the certainty of someone who'd found his courage again. 6 months ago, 3 little girls ambushed you at this exact table because they understood something I was too scared and broken to believe. That love isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about showing up, especially when showing up feels impossible. Sarah's vision blurred as tears she hadn't realized were building finally spilled over, carrying months of hope and fear and unexpected joy. You showed up when Grace needed emergency medical intervention. You showed up when corporate vultures tried to destroy everything we'd built professionally and personally. You showed up every single day in every way that mattered, long before I was brave enough to believe I deserved a second chance at happiness with someone extraordinary. Emma abandoned her sign and rushed to Sarah's side with the determination of someone who'd orchestrated this entire operation. "We voted," she announced with the importance of someone delivering election results. "All 4 of us cast ballots. Unanimous decision. We want you to be our forever family, legally and officially and permanently." Daddy explained that marriage means choosing to love someone every day, even when it's difficult or scary, Lily added, her artistic soul evident in the poetry of her phrasing. Grace delivered the final emotional blow with the precision of someone who understood exactly what words would matter most. "And we already choose you every day anyway, so this ceremony just makes our choice official for the whole world to see." Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a ring that took Sarah's breath away. Not the massive diamond that her ex-fiancé Marcus had offered her years ago in a misguided attempt to compensate for his emotional unavailability, but something infinitely more meaningful. A vintage Art Deco setting with 3 smaller diamonds clustered around a central stone that caught the cafe's lighting like captured starlight. The 3 smaller diamonds represent Emma, Lily, and Grace, Ryan explained, his voice steady despite the emotion clearly visible in his expression. "But they're all held together and protected by this center stone. That's us, Sarah. That's you and me, holding our entire family together and making sure everyone feels safe and loved." Sarah dropped to her knees so she was at Ryan's eye level, tears flowing freely now in a way that felt like release rather than sadness. "Yes," she whispered, then found her voice and said it louder. "Yes to all of you. Yes to Tuesday strategy sessions and experimental pancake recipes and science projects and dance recitals and everything else we haven't even discovered yet." The cafe erupted in spontaneous applause as Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly from the magnitude of the moment, and the girls tackled them both in a group embrace that nearly knocked them over, but felt like the most stable thing Sarah had ever experienced. "There's one more official item of business," Emma said, producing a folder of legal documents from her small backpack, with the efficiency of a seasoned executive assistant. "We already consulted with lawyer Lisa from Daddy's law school, and we want you to adopt us legally and officially, if you want to, which we really, really hope you do." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "You want me to adopt you, officially?" "We want to be Emma, Lily, and Grace Thompson Mitchell," Grace announced with the certainty of someone who'd given this considerable thought. "That way everyone will know we belong to both of you equally, and no one can ever question our family again." Sarah looked at Ryan, who was smiling through his own tears with an expression of complete happiness she'd never seen on his face before. "Victoria and I finalized our divorce last month," he explained. "She's accepting the permanent position in Zurich to head their new pediatric cancer research facility. It's her dream job and exactly where her skills can help the most children. She'll visit every few months, and the girls will spend 1 week each summer with her as Aunt Victoria. But she agreed completely that you should be their legal mother. She said anyone who shows up the way you have, who loves them the way you do, has earned that title in every way that matters." 1 year later, Dr. Ryan Thompson returned to practicing medicine on a carefully structured part-time basis, specializing in emergency pediatric consultations for Mount Sinai while building an innovative telemedicine practice that allowed him to maintain maximum time with his family. His reputation for diagnostic accuracy, particularly in complex cases that other physicians missed, had spread throughout the medical community in ways that surprised him with their speed and scope. Sarah's Future Learning Inc. had not only survived Robert Sterling's corporate attack, but thrived beyond her wildest projections. The company's IPO was ultimately valued at $900 million after federal investigators discovered extensive evidence of tech giants' systematic intellectual property theft from multiple smaller companies. Robert Sterling faced federal criminal charges while his company crumbled under legal scrutiny and public scandal. Sarah restructured Future Learning Inc. to focus specifically on medical education technologies, creating platforms that made advanced healthcare training accessible to underserved communities worldwide. The Thomson-Mitchell Foundation, established with a significant portion of Sarah's IPO windfall and guided by Ryan's medical expertise, provided comprehensive healthcare access and educational opportunities to single-parent families throughout the greater New York area. Their flagship initiative was a mobile medical unit that brought pediatric specialists directly to schools and community centers in underserved neighborhoods, a program inspired by Ryan's patient transport experience and Sarah's commitment to educational equity. But the most important change was their house in Westchester County, a sprawling property with enough space for the girls to run and play, a state-of-the-art home office where Sarah could manage her expanding company, a workshop where Ryan was teaching the girls basic carpentry and engineering principles, and a kitchen where they had finally achieved pancake perfection through Emma's systematic application of scientific methodology and quality control protocols. Emma, now 7 years old and even more formidable than before, had announced her intention to become a doctor-lawyer-president simultaneously, claiming that limiting herself to one career path was inefficient resource allocation. Lily was developing into a serious artist whose paintings of their blended family hung prominently in both Sarah's corporate headquarters and Ryan's medical practice. Grace had declared her intention to become a feelings doctor because she wanted to help children who were sad the way Daddy used to be sad before they became a complete family. Victoria visited them quarterly in her role as Aunt Victoria, maintaining carefully respectful boundaries while slowly rebuilding relationships with daughters who had grown far beyond needing her as a primary mother figure. The arrangement worked because everyone involved had learned to prioritize the children's emotional well-being over adult pride and past mistakes. On quiet Sunday mornings, when the girls sprawled across their king-size beds sharing newspaper sections and engaging in elaborate debates about breakfast preferences, Sarah often found herself reflecting on that rainy Tuesday evening when 3 brave little girls had decided to take their father's happiness into their own capable hands. "Penny for your thoughts," Ryan murmured one such morning, offering her a perfectly prepared cup of coffee. Oat milk with an extra shot of espresso, exactly the way she'd learned to prefer it during their months of gradual courtship. "Just thinking about how 3 little strategic advisors completely revolutionized our entire universe," Sarah replied, watching their daughters engage in a spirited debate about whether Grace's latest artistic creation deserved prime refrigerator real estate. "Best business consultants in Manhattan," Ryan agreed, settling beside her as Emma began a dramatic reading of the Sunday comics with full character voices and theatrical gestures. "The best family in Manhattan," Sarah corrected with absolute certainty, knowing she was right in ways that transcended logic or measurement. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories began not with love at first sight or perfectly orchestrated romantic meetings, but with love at first choice, the choice to show up when showing up felt impossible, to stay when leaving would be easier, to build something beautiful and permanent from the broken pieces of what had come before. And sometimes, if you were very fortunate indeed, that choice led to the discovery that chosen family possessed even more power and permanence than biological connections. The girls had been absolutely right from that very first evening when they decided to take matters into their own hands. Love wasn't about biology or destiny or even romantic compatibility. Love was about showing up every single day and choosing each other repeatedly, especially when that choice required courage and faith and the willingness to believe in possibilities that couldn't be guaranteed in advance. And in their house in Westchester, with its slightly crooked family photographs and its kitchen that perpetually smelled like experimental pancakes and unconditional love. They chose each other every morning when they woke up, every evening when they gathered for dinner, and every precious moment in between, when life reminded them that some kinds of happiness were worth every risk required to achieve them.